What's going on YouTube? Welcome to a series I like to call Hacked, a series where we talk about all things feats, speed, and hacks. Now the topic of today is the ability of none other than the Don Data of mainstream shonen, the #1 antagonist Sosuke Aizen, and his signature Kyoko Suigetsu. The Kyoko Suigetsu is a notorious ability that gives the user the ability to manipulate the 5 senses. Regardless of whether you are a king or a god, a single glance at the blade of the Kyoko Suigetsu will put you under the complete hypnosis. Once under the Kyoko Suigetsu, regardless of the fact that it may be centuries later, its hypnosis will never cease. Now when you take this incredibly complex ability in tandem with the fact that Aizen is a mastermind with incredible probability manipulation and is arguably one of the most intelligent characters in Bleach, the possibilities now become endless. And we see this displayed in the fact that Aizen is even capable of faking his death and creating false bodies. False bodies so meticulously crafted that they can even fool the careful and keen eye of characters like Retsu Unohana, who has been in the trade of healthcare for multiple centuries in the Soul Society. His manipulation of the senses is so precise that he can disrupt his soul chain and Haketsu soul sleep, as well as create contusions in his body and arteries in such a manner that even with Unohana's expertise, you can only speculate the slight possibility of the body being a highly concentrated reishi body known as a Gigai. With the Kyoko Suigetsu, Aizen has also managed other feats, such as fabricating and concealing the death of the Central 46 for a long duration of time whilst cultivating his Hogyoku retrieval plan during the Soul Society arc. Aizen regards this very ability to such a high extent that he refers to it as being flawless. Now naturally you should take his words with caution. Aizen has shown countless times throughout the series to be slightly unreliable with the things that he says, which sometimes come from a place of arrogance, or he intentionally censors information to further his incomprehensibly complex ideas and plans. For example, using the ability, he was able to manipulate a guy named Hirako Shinji, someone who had been observing him since he was literally in the womb. Despite being under his careful surveillance, due to the fact that Hirako wanted to keep him close but not too close, he wasn't able to pick up on distinct, very nuanced mannerisms between Aizen's behavior, and due to this, Aizen was able to undergo his holification research without ever being caught. Now something a lot of people won't pick up about that situation is that Aizen actually lies about what the Kyoko Suigetsu does. Or better yet, it wouldn't be too accurate to say a lie, but more so leaves out information about the ability, first implying that the ability is simply an illusion based on Zanpakuto. Now this isn't the only case where Aizen has lied or been misleading intentionally about his abilities. Of course, in the big reveal when he's talking about his Zanpakuto, he initially refers to it as a Rusui Zanpakuto, a facade of an illusion type Zanpakuto that was used to abuse the captain system and put everybody under the effects of Kyoko Suigetsu by seeing the blade. In this reveal we find out that Aizen can choose to allow you to see something whenever he wants, and on top of the unending effects, irrespective of your prior knowledge of its abilities and its range, once you've been put under its effects, it's absolutely impossible to evade. But as I said before, do not be fooled by its abilities. Aizen cannot be trusted. This ability is not without weakness. We actually find out during Gin's big reveal that the Kyoko Suigetsu is not without flaw. Due to Gin devoting his entire life, he was able to discover that the effects of the Kyoko Suigetsu can be undone by touching the tip of the blade. But wait, there's more. From what we gathered earlier, depending on the circumstance, you can actually differentiate based on very tight-knit nuances that something is part of an augmented reality that Aizen has fabricated using his ability. Now of course, these differences are just so indistinguishable unless you're given an extraordinary amount of time to analyze and differentiate. So this weakness most of the time will not be practical. I mean, Aizen isn't just a Zanpakuto user, he is an unbelievable Kido master. He is skilled in Hakuda, Janjutsu, and even in his base form, he possesses the power of 2 captains. Now of course, this ability is very impressive. When the visors return, Hirako Shinji is made painfully aware his illusion type Zanpakuto is a far cry from what Aizen possesses. The same thing he seems to constantly reiterate, the control over the 5 senses. What people don't understand is that Aizen is still lying here.
What did you say, nigga?
I was to tell you that Aizen actually manipulates more than just the 5 senses. You see, in Tosen and Kenpachi's fight, when Tosen uses his Bankai, the Suzumushi, an ability that siphons out the rest of the senses in the same space, leaving senses available only to the user of the sword. On countless occasions throughout the fight, both Tosen and Zaraki make a distinction between detecting spiritual pressure and your other senses. In fact, it's verbatim stated that the spiritual sense is a sense in and of itself, an intrinsic ability that arbitrarily defines characters who are more powerful than another. It gives gives you the ability to detect where more powerful foes are, even their condition, as well as their race depending on their reishi density. Now, due to the fact that there are a lot of parallels in Bleach, similar to Flash Step, Hiranyaku, and Sonido, Arankas likewise are equipped with a similar sense, but for them it's called the Peskia, or the spiritual sensing nerve. Ukiura and Yami, when they're invading the Karakura town, imply that this is an active process and can be developed by vigorous training, and Grimmjow also implies that by opening up your nerve, you're actually able to pick up on more distinct nuances. And there seems to be a correlation between threat level and the output of spiritual energy, and the more powerful characters seem to have a better affinity for using the spiritual sense. And it makes sense. These huge parts of the Bleach cosmology are comprised entirely of reishi, and when there are large-scale spells, characters like Aizen, who are being intentionally restricted from these spells, can detect disturbances and turbulence in reishi. When Kenpachi is trying to fight Ichigo, when he's searching for Ichigo, he's able to output a large amount of spiritual pressure to almost filter out the most powerful amongst them. And of course, this is where ordinary characters will be soul crushed. We actually get more clarification about this spiritual sense during the fight between Shinsui and Lilibaro, wherein Shinsui refers to this sense as Reikaku or Reiatsu Chikaku, where Shinsui says that everybody subconsciously manipulates both their Reikaku and their sense of sight in order to see things. And during areas of intense concentration, Reikaku actually takes over your sense of sight. So by relying less on your eyes, with a good enough affinity for spiritual pressure manipulation, you can actually create clones of yourself and intentionally mislead an individual's vision. It's why it's so incredibly hard to blitz characters in Bleach, and due to this reishi turbulence that we have, when an Espada, like for example Ukiura, is using his against Vase Lode Ichigo, Vase Lode is just so fast that he's able to breach this increased range of vision, which is actually just him utilizing his Pesquida nerve instead of just physically looking. Now, if Aizen was just only able to manipulate the 5 senses against countless captain level combatants, people who are so good at paying attention to detail like Unohana, then his ability wouldn't be too effective. In fact, Yamamoto comes to the same conclusion. Yet, Aizen is unusually comfortable about the situation. There seems to be a lot of evidence that suggests the fact that Aizen is also able to manipulate the spiritual sense, which makes perfect sense considering the fact that these combatants are completely unaware. Some of them have incredible reishi sensing abilities, for example characters like Shinsui, who are also being misled by Aizen, to the point where they can't even differentiate when Aizen is activating and deactivating his Kyokusuigetsu. So not only can Aizen manipulate the 6 senses using the Kyokusuigetsu, he then fuses with the Hogyoku, and when he's knocking on death's door in front of Mugetsu Ichigo, his already broken ability takes yet another step forward. His Zanpakuto shatters and he fuses with his Zanpakuto. And in doing so, 2 years later, when Yuha tries to recruit him, he's actually able to disturb Yuha's senses, implying that he's activated Kyokusuigetsu on Yuha without there being a blade visible. This now means that there is no involuntary way for an individual to break out of Kyokusuigetsu. The scope of the ability is so great that even Yuha, when he's able to view infinite possibilities like grains of sand with the eye of the Almighty, is still being fooled by the Kyokusuigetsu. Only Ichigo, who he intentionally did not put on the Kyokusuigetsu, can detect the distinction between the turbulence of reishi. So individuals fighting against Aizen no longer have the ability to try and touch his blade to break out of Kyokusuigetsu. They can be entranced simply by looking at Aizen, and in a fight where small nuances that Unohana could pick up on, these negligible differences can potentially become fatal, which means that Aizen had successfully perfected the Kyokusuigetsu, being able to completely eliminate these finite nuances. Aside from Aizen's own cockiness, the only way an individual can even hope to break out the Kyokusuigetsu now is if you're a combatant that has Reiatsu on the same level as Aizen, as stated in Can't Fear Your Own World. This is something that's also implied in the manga, given that Aizen needed to use Wonder Wise to fight against Yamamoto, somebody who's compared or likened to have the Reiatsu of 2, not only just captain level combatants, but far greater, some of the first people that the Soul Society ever introduces, Shinsui and Ukitake. And this idea is once again almost outright confirmed in Spirits Are Forever With You, where it's stated that Aizen would refuse to fight Kenpachi, somebody with an outlandish amount of Reiatsu, unless he had the Hogyoku. It just might be the reason why Yamamoto could actually confirm the presence of Aizen using the spiritual sensing method, due to the visible after effects of using the Hado 96 during his legitimate fight with Ichigo, who isn't under the effects of Kyokusuigetsu, and the after effects of Yamamoto's attack remain. All support the consistency of this Reiatsu argument. Or alternatively, you could argue that the reason why he was using Wonder Wise, the effects were simply because Yamamoto's flames could just destroy the entire world and therefore indiscriminately attack him regardless of where he is, and perhaps that's the reason why he got hit by Hado 96 anyways, just because of the insane range. But both of those are up for food for thought. Regardless of that, Kyokusuigetsu is an absolutely devastating ability that should never be underestimated. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. Comment down what video you want me to do next. I'm thinking of doing Chainsaw Man or an updated One Punch Man scale. Take care, guys.